Liverpool, home to the Liver Building, the Mersey Ferry, two 20th century cathedrals, a red brick university and the Albert Dock. It is also, perhaps most famously, the birthplace of the Beatles, John, Paul, George and Ringo. Though they recorded many best-selling albums, it's not one of these I'm going to discuss. It's not even one of their songs I'm going to discuss. It's just one tiny part of a song. Only about 3 seconds long, it's been debated by Beatles musicologists for nearly 50 years, and no one is entirely sure what it is. It is the Beatles' magical mystery chord. What you just heard was the chord. It's the opening of A Hard Day's Night written by John Lennon. Let's hear it again. The first thing to notice is that it's not really a chord. In fact, it's made up of 3 guitars, a piano and a bit of percussion, but for simplicity I'll call it a chord. The mystery of the chord was supposedly solved by Jason Brown a few years ago by using a bit of mathematics. Unfortunately, despite the story going all over the world, I think he got it wrong. His analysis was so flawed that he came up with an entirely bizarre answer. In this video, I hope to put the record straight, or at least a little straighter. First, let's see what technique Jason Brown used, as I think the technique is sound, he just misapplied it. We first need to go back in time to a mathematician called Joseph Fourier. In his early 20s, he played a part in the French Revolution and later in life had distinguished himself sufficiently to be one of Napoleon's favourite scientists. So much so that Napoleon chose him as one of the scientists he took to help invade Egypt. One of Fourier's greatest achievements was what we now call the Fourier transform. This evolved out of Fourier's theory of how heat flowed through materials. Basically, the Fourier transform allows us to take some signal, say a piece of music, and blow it apart so that we get the amplitudes of the constituent frequencies. That is, in theory, feed in some music and out will come the notes played. In practice, it's a bit harder, of course. So, back to the present day. Brown fed the chord into a Fourier transform and it spat out over 29,000 frequencies. To narrow down his search for notes, he dropped any frequency with low volume. This gave him this table. Even this small table looks horrible. His analysis led him to an answer that sounds like the following. It doesn't sound too close to the original, does it? Can we do better? For a start, there are better ways of visualizing the output from a Fourier transform. One method I used is Melodyne, but it's a bit hard to get to grips with easily, as you can see from this output. Instead, in this video, I'll use Transcribe because it gives a very useful piano keyboard as output. Let's feed in the chord. What we can see along the bottom of the Transcribe output is a standard piano keyboard labelled with the usual A to G for the notes. Above that, we can see a curve that gives the amplitude of the frequencies in the chosen bit of music. The higher the spike, the louder the frequency. We can see immediately from the keyboard how these frequencies relate to notes on a piano. Now, there is a stereo version of the chord, which in one speaker has Paul McCartney playing bass guitar and George Harrison playing a 12-string electric guitar. From the other speaker, we have John Lennon playing an acoustic 6-string guitar and the Beatles producer, George Martin, playing a piano. So we can analyse these channels separately, which is already a better analysis than Brown's. Let's feed in the bass and 12-string guitar. We start to see some interesting things. It looks like McCartney is playing a low D, labelled D2, but this is superseded in volume by a D3, i.e. 1 octave higher. In fact, most people say that he is playing a D3. We can see some action around D2, but the D3 looks louder. Does this mean that McCartney played a D3? Not necessarily. To show this, my colleague Rob Sturman and I went to James O'Doherty for some help with playing the guitar parts. Here is a D2. Notice that we don't just get the D2 frequency, in fact we get all whole number multiples of the frequency but at different volumes. These are called harmonics. They don't look like whole number multiples in the picture, but that is a story for another day. With this we can explain what's happening in the chord. We'll turn down the bass volumes by using this equalizer. As you can see, the D2 frequency, though initially louder, is now quieter, and it sounds like the following. So it is possible to play a D2 and for the frequency an octave higher to be louder. For the sake of argument, we'll go with McCartney playing a D2 with the bass volumes turned down. If this really was done in the recording, then Brown's method will give totally the wrong answer as he equates loud frequencies with notes played. Furthermore, if we look at the transcribe output for the speaker containing the bass, we see all the harmonics for a D2, and so we can conclude that one was played. It doesn't stop a D3 being played, but it does mean that a D2 was. Now, what is George Harrison playing? Well, the output suggests an F chord with an extra G. This is reassuring, as he said it was this in an interview. However, in addition, there is a bass F and a bass A added. Again, like the D2, their volumes are turned down. I'll give more evidence for this in a minute. This chord is often called an F add 9. Now, we couldn't get hold of an electric 12-string guitar, so we played the 6th string twice. It's not quite right, but it'll do for the moment. Now, what is John Lennon playing? He is playing the same as Harrison, but on an acoustic 6-string guitar. This has been verified by Weyness of Uranus, who came up with a killer idea. He analysed the Love remix of the chord and isolated the acoustic with what's called phase inversion. Let's load the remix of the chord into Transcribe and let's hear it. Notice that in the top right hand corner, Transcribe is telling us that it can't describe the chord. Now, if we get Transcribe to apply a phase inversion, various instruments will disappear. The Transcribe output simplifies, and in the top right corner, the software says that it's an F add 9. Looking at the output, it seems Lennon is playing exactly the same chord as we guessed for Harrison. And if we listen to it, then we can clearly hear an acoustic guitar. So Lennon is playing an F add 9. The piano part, played by the Beatles producer George Martin, is harder to discern. Weyness comes to our aid again. His solution is that Martin is playing D2, G2, D3, G3 and C4, and again the bass notes are reduced in volume so that we get mainly the harmonics. Here's Rob playing these notes on the piano with the sustain pedal on to get lots of these harmonics like in the original. Let's put all these together and hear the chord. Let's hear the Beatles. And now our chord again. It's close, isn't it? So here's our final version. Bass, D2, guitars, an F add 9, in other words an F, A, C, G, and the piano is D2, G2, D3, G3, C4. Well, there we go. That's how to use mathematics properly to find the Beatles' magical mystery chord. Is this the end of the story? Well, no. If I were to record it again, I would probably try using 2 bass notes, a D3 and a softly played D2. I'd try a slightly different piano part, and I'd add in some drums. Ringo has been left out of the picture so far. Anyhow, feel free to use these ideas to produce your own version or versions. I know it's not going to change the world, but you get to emulate the Beatles, and most importantly, it's great fun. Thanks for watching.